Mr. President, I don't usually object to the appointments and nominations by the administration to various ambassadorial positions around the world. And I also understand that there are numbers of political supporters, financial supporters. It is a characteristic of Republican and Democrat administrations alike. And it's never disturbed me when I have observed a nominee, say, to a Caribbean country, or maybe London or Paris or Berlin, as being a reward for support, both financial and otherwise. But now we are at a point where, according to the Washington Post, modern presidents have generally followed a 70-30 rule on ambassadorial appointments, where 70% are career foreign service and 30% are political appointees. President Obama has defied this historical bipartisan practice, and in his second term, a shocking 53% of ambassadorial nominees have been political. This brings his two-term average to 37, far more than any administration in the past. So it's very interesting that some of these nominees are at very sensitive positions in the world. And this nominee of Ms. Colleen Bell is probably the most egregious example of that. Hungary is a close ally in many respects, but there's no doubt that since taking office in 2010, the Hungarian Prime Minister, Mr. Viktor Orban, has centralized power, has faced scrutiny due to actions that critics charge are inconsistent with democratic principles and practices. His government has reduced the independence of Hungary's court, pushed through controversial changes to the Constitution, and placed acute restrictions on non-governmental organizations. In other words, this is a very important country. This is a very important country where bad things are going on. Ms. Bell's experience have been largely relegated to producing television soap opera, The Bold and the Beautiful. Now, I'm sure that television viewing is important in Hungary, but the fact is that this nominee is totally unqualified for this position in this country. Now, if it were, as I say, some Caribbean country, some other, I would understand that. But here we are with the relationship of with a country where, according to Bloomberg News, quote, Orban says he seeks to end liberal democracy in Hungary. Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orban said he wants to abandon liberal democracy in favor of an illiberal state, citing Russia and Turkey as example. By the way, we have an excellent DCM there in Hungary who has been doing a great job. Ms. Bell's, as I say, she has two qualifications. One is she's a producer of a television soap opera, no experience in foreign policy or national security, no familiarity with the language, country, or the region, has never been there, and lacks meaningful knowledge of history or economics. Her only significant qualification is that she bundled, as the word is used, $800,000 to President Obama in the last election, and as part of the California delegation to the 2012 Democratic Convention, she bundled more than $2.1 million for President Obama's re-election effort. I want to repeat again, I understand that there is political awards for political support, and it's grown with, quote, bundling. But when we send a person who doesn't know the language, has never been to the country, has no familiarity in foreign policy or national security, to a nation of this importance, then, my friends, we are making a serious mistake. The Hungarian Prime Minister is distancing himself from the values shared by most European Union nations. Orban said civil society organizers receiving funding from abroad needed to be, quote, monitored, as he considered those to be agents of foreign powers. We're talking about the International Republican Institute, the National Democratic Institute, Freedom House, and others. He calls them, we're not dealing with civil society members, but paid political activists who are trying to help foreign interests here. Amazing. Orban, who has fueled employment with public works projects, said that he wants to replace welfare societies with a workfare state. But the main problem is that Mr. Orban is cozying up to Vladimir Putin. He is now entered in a nuclear deal, and he is practicing the same kind of anti-democratic practices as what seems to be his role model, Vladimir Putin. So I would also like to point out that a letter I'd like to have entered in the record to Senator Reid from the 15 former presidents of the American Foreign Service Association, who say that as former presidents of the American Foreign Service Association, the Professional Association and Trade Union of Career Members of the Foreign Service, we urge you to oppose granting Senate consent to 3 candidates. They mentioned George Tunis to Norway, Colleen Bell to Hungary, and Noam Mohamed to Argentina. I think we should pay attention to these former distinguished members of the diplomatic corps. So, without objection. Mr. President, I urge my colleagues for once to vote against a totally unsuitable nominee to be ambassador to a very critical country in this struggle that's going to go on for a long time as Colonel Vladimir Putin tries to extend the reach of Russia and restore the old Russian Empire. We will be sending a message by this appointment that it really isn't that important. I urge my colleagues to cast a no vote. Mr. President, I yield the floor.